All right, good place to start. So just full disclosure, and just so everyone knows, we are recording all of our online event series, and those are going to be available for public consumption on the city website. And I'll share the link in the chat box. My name is Natalie Manning. I'm the outreach specialist for the Gentile Resilience District portfolio of projects and programs. And this project is inclusive of that. Just one thing that we want to note for this call, if you are, please note in the chat box if you're comfortable sharing that information, whether or not you are a resident, a partner, or an artist. And if you feel comfortable sharing your contact information, whether that be an email or however much or however little in contact information you want to share with us, that would be great. That way we can keep you informed and abreast of anything that we have coming through the pipeline for this project and any others relating to the GRD. I've met a couple more people. So right now I'll turn it over to Sarah Woodward, and she'll get us started for the presentations for day 3 of the Meet the Artist series.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I am the programs director with the Arts Council New Orleans. Thank you all so much.
Sorry. Natalie, it's still not recording.
It's recording.
Oh, it is on. It says it is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Thanks for checking. So today, as Natalie said, is the 3rd of our Meet the Artist online events. The focus of these events is truly to hear from community members. Our artists are in the preliminary stages of their public art proposals, and everything that they hear from you today will inform their final proposals. So we have 3 really wonderful artists who are presenting today. The first will be Langston, Allston, Rachel David, and then Caitlin Waugh. And as we're looking at their proposals, we'd love for you to let us know what you enjoy about these proposals, what they might consider changing, and just any ideas that you want to share. Truly anything and everything you want to share is appreciated, and I know how much these artists are excited to hear from you today. For those who are just joining us for the first time, the artwork will be installed in Gatto Park, Fillmore Park, and at 1 additional location. And so while we're especially looking for input from residents of Gentilly and the St. Anthony neighborhood, really anyone is welcome to share their ideas and thoughts. And I will be putting a link into the chat box so that you all can find where all of the videos will be posted and give the artists additional feedback on our website after these events. I do want to give you a heads up that with 3 different proposals to look at, the time is kind of tight today. And so we want to make sure we have time to discuss each of the artist proposals. So we're only going to have a little under 20 minutes for each artist to both view their proposal over video and then have a time to discuss. So I just apologize in advance if I need to cut anyone off to keep things moving forward in order to give time to everyone. So those, we do encourage you as you watch the videos and while we're in discussion to please make active use of the chat box on the right-hand side to leave comments and feedback as we go. So with that, I'm going to ask Aaron Chang to share his screen and go ahead and kick us off with Langston's video.
I'm Langston Allston. I'm an artist. I'm a mural maker. The murals I do typically focus on visual storytelling. I like to take an individual moment that I think is significant and then zoom out from that and think as broadly as I can about what is making that moment powerful and what's kind of powering it, and then kind of take that and put that into writing around the edges of the pieces. I did a piece in 2017 that was on the church on Bayou Road, St. Rose, that was about the first Black Civil War hero, Andre Caillou, and was able to kind of use a little bit of research and a little bit of creativity to tell a story that not a lot of people knew. So this project is really interesting to me because it goes hand in hand with a major infrastructure development. This is the first time I've ever done anything like that. So I have 2 ideas for the project. The first is to paint a mural on the basketball court that's going to be at the park on Wild Air Drive. And then the second is for a play structure that integrates murals to do some visual storytelling work. And that play structure could actually be placed at either park. The park that it's placed at will have an impact on the content. With both of the ideas, I want to get across kind of the same three main things. The first thing being to talk about the infrastructure, the water infrastructure especially, that keeps these neighborhoods dry and that allows people to live here. And then the second being the natural environment that all of that rests on. And the third, but probably the most important, is the vibrant communities that live around here, and then the ways that people move through the space, the ways they use this park, and the ways that they contribute to the environment. So each piece would approach talking about those three things in different ways. The basketball court is more of a single mural surface, and it would be constructed more of like icons to kind of point to each of those things. So in the sketch, I have an image of a cypress tree, of an ibis, of some Peggy Martin roses up the sides of it, and then pictures of some of the newer water infrastructure that's recently been added to help protect this neighborhood. And then there's a piece at the bottom for a little more text to include to talk about this project and people's hopes for the future. So the different panels, as you move around it, you will see a panel that maybe is from the present, something that's from the past, and then something that represents the ongoing natural life that's been here and is still here. As they approach it in different ways, they'll experience it in different ways. I want to know if people have any significant memories that they think I might be able to incorporate, any photos they'd be feeling comfortable sharing with me to use for these murals. I would love to incorporate quotes from the community. I want to know if people think there are any individuals that should be memorialized inside this project.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Langston, for that beautiful video.
Okay. Does anybody have any, questions about what my intentions are? There's two ideas that were in there. I don't know if everybody kind of separated those out all the way.
Do you mind maybe repeating those questions?
So the biggest questions I have are kind of probing for content for the pieces. All of the sketches and material that I've done so far is really just placeholders to kind of show what I'd like to do. So I want to get, if I can get any photos that people have that they'd like to share, those could be material for murals. And I would also like to know if there's anybody that wants to maybe do an interview or a conversation so that I could start coming up with a little bit more focused community-oriented material to incorporate into the murals, either on the play structure or on the basketball court. That's the stuff that I want the most, is photos and conversations.
What type of photos did you have in mind, Langston?
I didn't have any in mind in specific. I was hoping that what people share with me would kind of guide me along a little bit. I mean, it could honestly just be Facebook pictures or pictures of people celebrating. It could really be anything. Family photos, whatever people are comfortable with or think might be nice to have in the neighborhood. They're not going to be rendered photographically realistically, so it'll be a little more generalized however they are represented. But if people have something that they want shared on that scale, I would love to get it.
I love that concept, Langston.
This is Cameron. I think you might have a great opportunity here to, when you said the past and the current and then the future theme of those photos in both of the basketball court and playground murals, I think you may have an opportunity to really go back on when water was available to the neighborhood and how it was available in the neighborhood. I don't know how it was and if it was, but that might really help people to even understand more about the connection of going in a direction of reinstalling green infrastructure in these neighborhoods. I think there's a good opportunity to bring back the past of how water was in these neighborhoods before we covered it all up and figured out a way to get it all out. So I thought that it was a great concept to try to bring that there.
Yeah, that's something I really want to try and hit on because there have been like a lot of big infrastructure projects that have allowed this neighborhood to be livable. And so I kind of want to like show some of that progression and maybe show some of like some missteps, but also some successes, and like get people a little bit educated as to why things are the way they are and how they might change. That's going to be easier to do with, I think, the play structure idea than it would be with the basketball court idea. But it's something that I'd like to try and aim at least.
I think that I'm thinking back to the conversation from earlier in the week with Cadro Williams and the Young Artist Movement students. And I'm thinking about, so one of the responses that came up then, Sandy Rosenthal, who's led up the Flooded House Museum effort and levees.org, she mentioned that she has a contact list of people who, some of whom haven't returned to Gentilly, who would be eager to share their stories. I'm thinking about Bob Turner, who showed us around Pump Station 4 and how he talked about his father hanging out on the banks of the canal when he was younger. And I think so there are people definitely out there with images and stories. And I think Sarah Woodward and I were talking a little bit about some of the challenges of the online format. And I think for people to be sharing stories that are oftentimes traumatic or really personal, that we have to, right before the pandemic hit, we were planning a series of coffee conversations with residents to get that kind of one-on-one time. And we obviously didn't go that route because of the pandemic, but I'm thinking ahead to all these different requests for stories and images and what it would take to build the levels of trust and personal connection that I think that are necessary for people to actually go and share their work, especially in such a public way. I'd be curious if Peggy or others have thoughts on that.
Are you talking about like an oral history of the neighborhood where people can talk about their experiences before and after Katrina and how long they've lived there and so forth?
I think that would be really useful for everybody's projects, especially the ones that I'm thinking about. But I also know it's a huge ask for people. And so I'm trying to figure out how to maybe find some type of balance between what people are comfortable with and what we do have the capacity for, and also like that larger thing.
Courtney, I was curious about that question as well. I know that there have been, surveys in the past, and I know that Sandy Rosenthal shared with me that, she's done quite a bit of outreach to former residents of the area near the London Avenue Canal Levee Breach site, and she's maintained connections with those residents. And so I think that, doing some outreach individually might, bring about a level of comfort or relationship building that might be different from this type of forum. So let's all do a little bit more thinking about that and think about the best ways to kind of collect this information.
What about the neighborhood story project?
Rachel,
Abram
go
and Shauna have. What about the neighborhood story project? Abram and Shauna have a lot of resources to you know, and historical clout to access people and their stories.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I don't know if they've worked in Gentilly, but it's definitely worth finding out because I know that they've done work across the city. Thank you, Rachel.
There's also several businesses around there that have been open for a long time, and so I wonder, like, that have been family businesses. Maybe that's a good, like, to start jumping off point to you know, talk to the business owners in that area whose families have probably troves of photos and stories as well.
Yeah. Normally when I do a project, I'm like lucky enough to gather a lot of this organically, but being stuck inside has made that pretty difficult. So I'm trying to figure out how to kind of get over that right now.
Yep.
For sure.
And Langston, I am a Gentilly resident, but I just don't think my photos are that interesting.
It's not about them being interesting or being good, honestly. Like you don't have to make great photographs to kind of give a little bit of content to this project.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know what people remember, honestly. Like, yeah, what people remember and what they think is important. I know that sounds really general, but sometimes photographs, even simple ones, can share that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. So your murals would be put on some type of grid. So
yeah,
how
so
many?
The grid is not married to a grid. That
Okay.
was just a model that I built to try and start thinking in 3 dimensions because I don't normally do that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to build a play structure that allows you to climb on it, or allows kids at least to climb on it, and then allows people from the ground to look at multiple images at once.
Mm-hmm.
So you can the past and the present at the same time. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So the shape is still in flux. I just built that little box and start putting images next to each other and start thinking a little bit more 3-dimensionally about this. But it could be a dome, it could be, you know, anything that's relatively safe for kids to climb on, and also obviously sturdy enough to get rained on a lot. So the structure is in flux, but I just want people to be able to see multiple murals at once and think about the past and the present together.
I liked the grid, and it was a interesting way to use murals. So I did like the grids, and I didn't know it was going to be a play structure too. That's another important point. Thank you, Langston.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for all that valuable feedback. I'd like to move us forward. If anything comes up, you have further thoughts about Langston's proposal, you can, of course, go onto our site and fill out his survey to give him more insights and ideas if you think of anything else. So Erin, can you pull up the site and take us to Rachel David's proposal?
I'm Rachel David. I'm a sculptor, furniture maker, and custom metal worker specializing in forging. I heat material, primarily steel and different alloys. I have done a significant amount of public works around town. I make work that focuses on social and environmental justice, trying to note those and promote conversation by creating intriguing textures that mimic cellulite and body restraints and how our bodies and the landscape mimic each other and correlate. One of the proposals that I would love your feedback on is this dock that goes out into the bioswale to kind of have a quiet space. It is separate from the plantings, and you would watch how the water changes and the plants and the seasons. And these would be little places to sit. And it would be a low dock, and I hope to work with the engineers and landscape architects to really build this to be a fulfilling space to inhabit. There will be a future where we can cohabitate and like connect together and be closer, and this will be hopefully part of it. The other idea is a kind of seating area with a shade structure over it. Then this other idea that I'm toying around with and I want your feedback on is kind of this like multi-level cluster of these forms that are sort of tucked into the topography and have a shade structure. I think that these projects would be an interesting addition to the New Orleans landscape of public art and into these really cool, sensitive and sensible playground renovations. And I think that there's a lot of playfulness in them and in the objects I want to make. I'd really like to hear how people might like the seating to be expressed or like materials. I'm really interested in recycled aggregates for concrete if people have an understanding of that, and like just whatever, like, or if this is a terrible idea and you don't want to dock into the bioswale, like I'd definitely like to know that too. This is such a huge privilege to get to ask residents and experts for feedback about a piece that we're proposing. That's why there's so much horrible public art that just like is tone deaf in people's neighborhoods. Is like there's not this kind of feedback from residents, and it's just like, this is awesome.
Rachel, this is Danny McElmurray. How would you think to tuck? You were talking about like kind of tucking into the topography with the one that has the shade structure. How would you do that? Would you do embedding, or would you do like a retainage where you step it down, or how do you think you would do that?
I would really like to work with a landscape architect on that. This was also filmed and the ideas were developed before we were presented with a workshop of the landscaping. So like there's some editing that I would probably do in those drawings, but I would love to see these kind of tree stump forms. Like they're kind of tree stumps, barnacle shapes, tucked in, so they would act as some kind of retaining structure. And part of what was clipped from my video was that they would have a polished concrete or brass or stainless seat top, so that the goal of this is that there's little to no, and the shell would be core 10 or weathering steel. So the goal of this is that there's little to no maintenance that is not human. You know, if someone graffitis it, that is not in my control, but anything in my control, that it would be easily dealt with. So it would be tucked. I was seeing on the drawings that I could see that when I couldn't blow them up super big, but that there looked like there was some aspect of topography in the field.
Yeah, there is.
Well, that's what I would like to work with an expert on how to manufacture a situation like that, so that there was like some land hill thing, and then the seating comes out, and then the shade structure kind of comes up at an angle so that when the western sun comes in, it shelters the seating during that really hot evening in the summer. That's the idea.
Okay. I especially like if you look at the sorry. If you look at the sun angles and do like a sun study, you can find out, you know, based on where the actual layout is, what's going on with it. So apologize for the dog.
Do you know where that, is there something on the, are you one of the landscape people? Are you one of the?
I'm chief of landscape architect at Parks and Parkway. So
is there a link on your website for that, or can you link to, no? Okay. I see solar guys. Okay.
Ask the consultants for the team. They may have done a sun study. I'm not sure. You know, a sunshade study.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and you may want to look. I mean, if you're going to do it where you want the shade in the afternoon, then really your small pavilion or your seating area would need to face the east. You know, you can have the opening in the west, but then face it towards the east. So.
Rachel, this is Cameron. One of the easiest ways to do that yourself is just make a miniature scale model and take it out there to the site and literally sit it there and go at different times during the day and take your images, your pictures at different angles, and you'll get exactly what you need, and it'll be, you know, site specific.
Is this a more attractive option than the dock option to people? Is this like what's worth developing more?
As soon as you said shade, I was like thumbs up.
Yeah. It's going to be a long time before those trees. I mean, we have trees out there in some places, but it's going to be a long time before the trees actually provide enough shade for people to be able to sit out there and enjoy the shade of whatever the different species are. So some immediate shade, I will recommend against using Core-10 steel if anybody's touching it, because it gets all over their clothes. And you have some very angry patrons because we have it in one location and it tends to get on people's clothing when they brush up against it. So if it's like the overhead, that's great. But if it's where they're seating, you know, I would do that out of something that's much more durable and doesn't stain anything.
It does seem like they're not mutually exclusive. Like a dock doesn't necessarily not have a shade structure also.
It's financially not possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real thing. Is I would love to make a shade structure on a dock, because how fun is that? But like the money doesn't pay for something like that, as far as my initial math goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like the dock idea. I guess the thought is that there isn't ever really standing water except for right when it's rained. So maybe the extension isn't actually over water anyway, given we learned after after you recorded this, but I like the idea of that kind of extending into a space and whether it's into the grasses or the flowers or something like that.
Rachel, can you share? Oh, sorry, Peggy. Go ahead.
Rachel, if you would like to see the angle of the sun and a shade structure in Donnelly Park, which is at Burbank and Wildair, there is a shade structure over part of the playground equipment. It's closed now because of the pandemic, but if you come to the park, you can see the angle of the sun at different times of the day and you can see what the shade does, particularly as it gets hotter in the year. So we've already got a structure here. And if you would like to get an aerial view of that area, I'm at 6005 Wildair, directly across from the park. If you just come up the ramp and look over the railing on the porch, there's chairs up there and you can watch and see it. But that'll give you a pretty good idea. The porch faces west, so it'll be cooler in the morning. In the afternoon, you'll get direct sun in your face. But if you want to get an example of what it's going to be like, just come to Donnelly, because we do already have a shade structure.
Thank you. That's super generous to, thank you.
Rachel, would you mind speaking? I imagine the choice of words like dock and have had different levels of meaning. I'm curious if you could share a bit more about that instinct to extend out into a depression and to engage the environment in that way.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a really good point. So the part of it is sort of the history of reclaiming the swamp area and what we do when we're around water, and also kind of referencing a lot of the trails and paths that are like at Barataria swamps, the boardwalk style trails. And like the dock extending is kind of a lot of, when I was looking at the section of the parks, it seemed like there was a significant area, like depression area for the bioswale. And from our workshop a couple, like last week or the week before, whenever, I guess like I learned that that the grade is not so significant as I had interpreted or had wanted to interpret. So I'm just like, that happening right after we filmed kind of makes a lot of my thoughts less valid or less applicable to the space. So yeah, what I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I'm just gonna share my screen really fast, if that's okay. One really quick thought is thinking about the dock idea in different forms, like the possibility of spreading out some of the cylindrical elements and like having them be stepping stones across, or some of them could even be bigger where kids can stay and explore that space, and then this space would fill with water.
Yeah, that's really cool. That was one of the things, but I'm interpreting, am I wrong that the bioswale is, so what we were talking about at that workshop was that there's 1 foot of grade per 50 feet over the space? Am I, so that's not very much. And I was kind of, for the field.
The fields are very gently sloped. It's mostly imperceptible. Like every athletic field is designed to have some positive drainage. The rain
so the bioswale is?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bioswales and rain gardens have more significant slope.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
You do have to make sure you look at the, I don't know if you have the drawings or not, but make sure you look at the drawings to check what measurement increments they use when they show the grading, because it may be graded in inches or it may be graded in feet. We tend to grade in inches in New Orleans because we don't have a whole lot of elevation change in the city. So that's one thing. It could be in half feet, It could be in inches, it could be in feet. So you just have to really make sure you're checking that, what the measurement scale is, or, you know, what the measurement unit is. Okay.
I had really thought that I understood the drawing and then thought that my understanding of the drawing was incorrect after the meeting, and I had asked about the grading, but I guess it was just me not asking the right question.
Yeah, I think the athletic fields are going to be kind of domed, higher kind of in the middle, and then the bioswales and rain gardens will be depressions that are visible. Like you're usually digging down 3 or 4 feet, and the mulch and the plants may make it look, but the bottom of it will be significantly lower than the surrounding landscape.
That's what I thought I saw in the drawing, and then doubted myself.
No, they're not super easy to read.
There is some room for earth moving still though too. So right. So if you really wanted more of a mound to tuck into, it seems like that was somewhere in the possibilities. That
Alex might add more to that. I think that would be a little bit challenging. I think just because if you don't know which art piece will be selected yet, it doesn't make sense to change the grading plan based on something that's not set. So my advice would be to figure out a way to attach the ground, a foundation that can be a bit lighter or that works regardless of the grading of the landscape.
Yeah, I would agree with what Erin had said. Hey, this is Alex. I am not a landscape architect myself, but I'm working with I'm with Alston Robinson, and we're doing the landscape architecture for the parks. So we can I just put my contact information on the right. So folks do have more questions about the drawings or the grading, we can answer those for you.
Thank you. Does anyone, so I'm hearing a kind of combination, which I really love to hear. And like when I get to do commission work for my personal practice and job, like the more feedback that I get from my clients and from the people who are looking at what I'm doing, it's really inspirational, and I really value everyone's insights and participation and you know, understanding about what's going on, because like I don't know everything, I just do metal work. So I just really appreciate that y'all would take the time and consideration to think about the projects.
I would add that the first part of your video where you're showing some of your other work was super compelling in the ways in which you talk about the relationships between the control of the body and flesh with the control of the landscape. And I think I imagine those same themes are present in your ideas and the sketches that, but maybe it wasn't quite as clear to me. I'd be curious to learn more about how you're translating it to this kind of infrastructural effort in this particular landscape.
So what I would like to do in terms of the seating is have you could see some of that texture. I don't have any in my room here, but what you could see some of that texture going on those cabinets and everything. So that would be, I think, on the sides of the seating, so that a person could touch it with, like, put your hand down and feel the seat, and so you would see it and like really exist with that, because it's a really weird texture. You know, I could take you into the shop really quick, and I'll show you. Okay, we're gonna run into the shop. Here we go.
And then once we'll be ready to switch over to Caitlin's.
Okay, sorry. So this is
super cool.
for your input, y'all.
All right, so I am going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll transition to Caitlin's. Just so you all know, this video is still somewhat in progress. So this is the first preview, but we'll likely have an updated version of it up on the site next week. So thanks so much. And thanks to Rachel and Langston. So give me one sec.
My name is Caitlin Isel Waugh. I am a glass artist. I use mixed media as well. Primarily I work with glass and mirror. I also spend a lot of time forming with copper and mirror. I own my own business, which is called Parif, and I do stained glass restoration and make custom sculpture work for people. And then I also have a small gallery that I co-own that's on Magazine Street uptown called Potence. I fuse plants between glass and the kiln, and then it leaves the ash of the plant behind, and that lets me make panes of glass that help preserve people's wedding flowers or make ceremonial space with medicinal flowers or altar spaces. All of my work is based on the natural world, on plants, on organic forms. The shower that I've made is really indicative of how I make space and how making space that feels sacred, that feels comfortable, that is functional is a big driver of my work. I gravitated towards this project because I'm looking to make a shift in my career from smaller objects and really wanting to make larger pieces that that function for society in a more meaningful and more holistic way. When we were doing our initial tours in January, there were two things that really grabbed my attention the most: how much plastic is getting into the waterways, and I think that most people in the community would be really surprised by the quantity. When we were at the levee breach site, I had a really deep desire to look over the levee wall. And at that space, I really felt it strongly. I wanted to see on the other side, and there's not a great way to do that. And I've been developing the idea that you could have a porch or a structure that was high enough that you could see out over the levee wall. The idea is that there would be 3 structures, and you get to them with ramps. All 3 structures basically look the same. I would like to be able to see out of each structure along the railings or below the railing. I am hoping to incorporate the plastic bottles from the pump station into the structures. So I would like to show what can be done with trash that's headed into our waterways. And so the thought is that the bottles would represent where the river is and where the lake is. And so I've been thinking a lot about how those plastic bottles could be in designs in the ceiling as well to track the sun and the moon's patterns. I'd really like for the bottom of each structure underneath to be reflective, to be mirror, so that it reflects what's underneath it and looks like it's floating in a way. And so the notion is that they're making community space. Ideally, there would be a table and chairs in each one of the structures so that they really can be used to have meals and gather. And then you'd be centered the sun and the moon and the lake and the river and the space, so that in that way it's connecting to my space making ideas.
The way that recorded, at least for me, the way that was downloaded, it was pretty beyond editing. It was a little hard to see. So, and it definitely felt jumbled. Like there's a million ideas that didn't have space to exist and seemed like they were kind of competing. So, I guess I'd like to take an opportunity to first just kind of review what I was trying, what the thoughts are, and in a less like jammed together way. And then hopefully that video will once edited a bit more, we'll present that, because all the material was all there. But, so I also have two ideas. One of them was a thought that there would be maybe a mirror kind of swoop or sculpture that goes up over the levee breach site wall, so that you could kind of see or have it reflected the other side. That's something that Courtney Egan is going to talk, has a similar idea about. We've had a couple really nice conversations potentially about collaborating. So that didn't get into this video, but she's going to talk more about that on Tuesday. So just that's one thing that is a thought that's happening. And then it kind of led me to that sense of being able to look over the levee, led me to the idea that I have that's more developed than that, which is this these structures. So I'm gonna screen share, and I haven't done that before, so let me know if it works. That's working?
Yes.
Okay, so these were sideways before, but so the idea is that there would be 3 structures that you got to from a ramp. Probably each of these 3 structures would also have like a ladder egress as well, but ramps for accessibility. And each of the structures, I'm still working out what the shape of the structures might look like. So one of the questions on the survey questions is, you know, should this look like a water tower, or a fishing camp, or these kind of like this dome-like situation, or there's, you know, I had some different thoughts about the structure of the shape of these structures, the style of them. And the thought was that there would be 3 and the floor of each structure, they'd be up on stilts, and the floor of each structure would indicate a different height. So one height, and this is another survey question, is a thought about which heights they can indicate. So perhaps one of them is, you know, the flood level rise at Katrina. Another one is probably sea level, where sea level is in that area. Then the third one is, I think I'm landing on some projected future height, but that's another part of the conversation I'd like to develop with the community, which levels, which 3 heights are, you know, are most compelling, or, you know, want to be commemorated in these. And so you'd kind of be going tiered up, right? I talked about the shower, my outdoor shower, in that video, because I you know, I'm quarantined in my house, and so I've just been like working outside, making spaces. And so that was the contextualization, but I've got a few other things, like if we have time, I can show you how more public art spaces I've made. I've worked on like ceremonial space, or space that you spend time in. And so in this case, the thought is these are on stilts. The bottom of them are mirrored under here, so that it reflects what's going on underneath it. That is kind of a nod to the idea of like the floating cities, and the kind of this future that we're headed towards, of like living with water and having there be kind of a floating city, like nostalgia, or nostalgia for the future. So at the pump station, there was a crazy amount of bottles, and it seemed to me like, maybe somebody can help me know this more specifically, that they clean out the pump station of all of these plastic bottles a couple times a year, not a huge amount, and they don't have a great way to get them out. They have to like go down this ladder and like fish them all out in kind of a in a way that wasn't thought through when they designed it originally. And so my thought was that they could clean out these bottles, and I would take them and make them and use them to make designs. And so some of the inspiration that I had, there's just all over the world, there's these beautiful both glass and plastic bottle, this is all plastic, design. And it can be really clean and fresh and beautiful and so the stained glass style that of my work would kind of come through in this way, playing with light like this. And so these are all bottle structures that I think are really beautiful. And so the idea is that there would be bottles I'm just gonna go through these really quickly to give a sense. Okay. So there'd be along the railing under here, there's like the rivers here, the lakes here. So the orientation of each of these would matter, so you have a sense of place and space. And then kind of similar to the conversation we were just having about sun and moon as well, I got really into looking at these pictures. These are all using a pinhole camera, really in a really simple way. These are the like photographs that are taken of how over 6 months the sun changes, like arc in the sky. And I think these are so cool. And so I would like to do a site-specific version of this that then gets translated into the roof. And you can do it for both the moon and the sun. And so those would be different colored bottles or some indication of, so that the swoop over the roof, there's the kind of two swoops that indicate, and then the sun and the moon would shine through and illuminate those spaces. So hopefully it's kind of a lot, but there's this idea of, the ramps going up that would be wheelchair accessible. And the idea is that you just get to spend time in these 3 different spaces. There's table and chairs, and you can, spend time in them. Probably they'd be arced. Originally, I thought about them being at the levee breach site so that you could get to the top, the highest one, and see over the levee. But I also think that it's a really, that it would work really well in in either of the parks, probably more Gatto than Fillmore. But so these are my rough sketches. It seemed like I had a lot more that I was hoping would be shown, but that's probably enough to get a sense of where I'm headed. And the show one.
So I know we just have since we just have a few more minutes, I think it would be, well, 2 things. One, anyone who has thoughts about this work can, again, go on our site and give Caitlin feedback on our website, and we'll have a couple minutes for comments. And then I'd also like to propose, we have one final Meet the Artist event next Tuesday. And so for anyone who's able and willing, that perhaps we could add an extra 15 minutes on to next week's call so that we can all watch Caitlin's final video and give her some thoughts. But with that, I'd love to just hear people's reactions, since I know not all of you will be able to join us on Tuesday.
So Caitlin, how large do you see each structure being? Like, would it hold like 2 people? And the second question I have is, would the project budget allow you to develop 3 structures?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think there's a couple things at play. If they're made out of wood, then probably. It's sort of like building small decks, and and especially since all of the bottles are free, there's a fair amount of material that would go into it that doesn't cost anything. So I'm hoping that 3 would work. It's possible that just 2 does when it actually gets panned out. There's been a little bit of conversation about potentially like collaborating with another artist. Maybe maybe that includes murals or that are added to the silt area, or I think that there are some ways in which some collaboration could potentially adjust the budget too. So I think there's a lot that's not known about the budget. And then size. My hope is that you could have like a small picnic table, that 4 to 6 people could inhabit. So you could have you could go there and have a meal, and so not huge, but 12 by 12-ish, that's something around, or 10 by 10-ish, something like that. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Caitlin, I've just sent you a few ideas that I had, but really quick. One of them is when you have the 3 structures, if you're trying to get up so that you have some visibility, it's going, the length of your ADA compliant ramp would be crazy long. 15 feet is a super long ramp. You can go to the municipal yacht harbor and look at their ramps to get up to the bathrooms. They're crazy. I mean, it'll be cheaper to build an elevator almost. So
yeah, that's
so if you will, maybe take a look at that and do some measuring out there and say, this is not, but maybe there's a way of doing that idea, really like the canopy idea of bringing in the sun and and how does water work with the moon and the sun. I think those are really strong ideas for your concept.
At the Levee Breach site, there's it's really soggy and wet leading up, so there's actually like room for, or maybe desire for, a really long ramp. But you're right, in the playgrounds, I kind of thought that through, and then in the playgrounds, you're right. Maybe if they're a concentric circle or something, it makes sense. Or thanks for that. Does anyone have ideas about which of those sites does seem like the best place for this?
I actually think the playground will be better because I think it'll be more flexible, and there may be some flexibility in use that you may not have otherwise.
Yeah.
I'd say that I'm most drawn to the conditions that you're creating. So the prismatic qualities of plastic and glass, the ways in which a reflected surface of grass or water can change how somebody feels and their sense of space and environment. And to me, those qualities and conditions are more important, I think, than the creation of structures. And I think it may be helpful to really hone in on what's the most essential aspects of what you're proposing, and figuring out a way in which that can be adapted to different sites. I think the possibilities of reflecting water and all that are really tremendous. Like imagining a mirrored surface over a rain garden where maybe the sun's come out, but there's still water in the rain garden, and how that could change somebody's perception. So all that I think is fantastic. And I think the instinct to build something actually takes away from that, both the budget wise and then the structural work. All of that is more work than I think is necessary for what is essential to your concept.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. That's useful. And it may be, I don't know, perhaps it just gets boiled down to this one structure, and the entrance to it, and it's just at sea level. Like perhaps that also is it just gets simplified so that all the other, so there's, yeah, they're pretty open still to what that might be.
Your work with the ash remains and kind of that angularity that you have in your smaller work. We'd really like to see that come through into the structure.
appreciate that you saying that. I've been thinking a lot about how of the plants in the space and whether I'm pulling those in, because that's really where my work usually goes. And because they're glass, I was thinking, I've just been toying with does this space have glass in it or not?
Well, there may be a way of providing that glass, but then you put another layer on the outside of it with the recycled plastic, like plexiglass or something like that.
Mhm.
Or maybe a way of protecting it or using it, like in tubes where people can see it, but they can't actually touch it, stuff like that.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you everyone. I know we're a few minutes over, and again, I'd love for anyone who can, if you can stay a little bit extra on Tuesday to watch the final video, and we'll have 3 final artists who will be presenting their proposals next Tuesday evening from 6 to 7. So we really hope that all of you can come join us again, and please spread the word to anyone you think might be interested in joining us. We so appreciate your time and think that your insights as these artists are working on their proposals is just incredibly useful and beneficial to creating really incredible work that speaks to these really complex issues around environmental resilience. So thank you all so much again.
Thanks for all your feedback.